Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Excited that we're here, that we get to move forward. We had an awesome MindShifters and StillPoint Breathing workshop this weekend. It was just fabulous, and it was interesting. You know, on Saturday morning, we do the StillPoint process. We do some processing and then breathe. And then Sunday, at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, we do a processing session. Well, before the show, or before the processing session on Sunday, I had some stuff start moving physically. And so before the session happened, I had time to stop and do a StillPoint breathing session myself. And it was just really sweet, really awesome, and opened a space for a whole new piece of understanding in regard to how people get confused, especially on this thing of forgiveness. You know, for 50 years, and I've actually had many people over the years who said, well, Michael, why don't you just change the word from forgiveness? You know, use a different word, because nobody understands that forgiveness stuff you're teaching. It's like, well, but, you know, Vladimir Lenin, here's a guy who's probably responsible for more deaths, more murders on planet Earth than any human being in history, said the way you destroy your culture is change the meaning of its words. So I wasn't interested in supporting the changed meaning of the word forgiveness, meaning that I'm going to let you off the hook for what's going on inside of me. And you know, keep moving forward with, here's what the word forgiveness actually means. It's a tool with which you go inside yourself and change the content of your own mind, the energetic patterns that are held in your physiology that are the cause of your diseases, your suffering, your poverty, or whatever's going on, and or are the cause, you know, holding to those things that are the cause of wellness, well-being, and aliveness. And what clarified for me after doing that StillPoint session personally, and then stepping, I mean, I literally, Jeanie called me, and you know, a minute later we were on the call with the group in the workshop, and the question came up about, you know, doing Ho'oponopono as forgiveness. And if you look at the principles as they're taught, now I don't believe that we're actually looking at the original Hawaiian principles the way that it's taught today, because, you know, it's a fallacy to say I love you, because love isn't something we can do to each other. It's a state of being. It's what we are. So when I say I love you, I'm totally and completely in a realm that my mind cannot comprehend or do anything with. Please forgive me. You know, like, forgiveness isn't about you letting me off the hook or me letting you off the hook. There is no forgiveness of another. That's foolishness. Forgiveness is, oh, I have some sort of untoward energy inside of me, and I'm going to collapse my perception that verifies my untoward energy is justified, and I'm pointing it at you. It's how I go inside myself and remove that untoward energy. So each of the statements is a falsity. However, it is a high-level conversation compared to what most people are doing. Most people are doing hate and rage and fear and guilt and grief. So replacing that conversation with, I love you, please forgive me. What are the other statements? I love you, please forgive me. I don't remember what the other two are. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, people who say I'm sorry become sorry people. We suggest you never say you're sorry to anybody. I remember the movie, and I never understood it until we developed and created the apology tool. Gee, if I'm off base and I do something that's totally out of line with truth and harmony in our relationship, then I want to own that. I want to apologize for that, and I want to speak about what I'm going to do with it in the future, rather than tell you how sorry I am for doing this and getting your mind and my mind focused on whatever this is, which is just a strong energetic vote for, I'm going to do this again. Whereas when I use the apology tool, gee, you know, I really apologize. I take responsibility for what I did, and in the future, here's what I'm going to do. Now I've got two minds joined in doing the highest and best possible. So each of the statements is very high level in the realm of what we would call the mind of men. You know, if you look in the scriptures, there's actually an interesting passage where, and this gets out of the religious realm. It's not religion. It's just, here's where you live. Here's how it works. So we see Yeshua come out of the Garden of Gethsemane, and Peter's there with a sword, and he's going to protect Yeshua. And Yeshua directly calls Peter Satan. Not a very nice thing. And he says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And then he explains what he means. He says, "For you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God." What is the residence of what the world calls Satan? I'd offer it's the mind of men. And most men are trapped there, and I'm talking most of humanity. So Satan in Aramaic means the resistor, one who misleads. So Peter is trying to mislead the whole game. He's going to stop this experience that Yeshua has set up for himself. And Yeshua calls Peter Satan for doing it. He says, "Get thee behind me. For you think in the mind of man rather than the bigger plan." When we're stuck in the mind of man, we say things like, "Please forgive me, I'm sorry," blah, 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 blah. And again, that's a high-level conversation compared to hate and fear and rage and blame and guilt. But it's still not accurate in the actuality of this energy system. In the actuality of the energy system, forgiveness is the tool with which you collapse projected perceptions of blame. You access the untoward energy in yourself that's beneath that projection, and you process that energy out of your field. You free yourself from it. That's the process of forgiveness. So if I'm telling you how I'm going to forgive you, or you should forgive me, again, high-level conversation in the mind of man, but it means nothing. It is totally and completely in error. Particular case when Yeshua was talking to Peter, he calls the plan of God in the realm of the actuality of how this energy system works. And then what clicked for me was thinking about this conversation where Yeshua was talking to some of the disciples, and he speaks about those who would throw out the truth, those who have no clue of what's happening in the actuality. So they would deny functioning out of the actuality. And he says those who are in that state, who would deny how things work and replace it with a lie, are called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Heaven, and the kingdom of heaven simply means in Aramaic the community of love. This isn't religious. Are you functioning out of a mind connected to love? Then you are literally in the kingdom of heaven. If you're not, you're in the mind of man. And so he says, if you've got a really high-level conversation going on in the mind of man, hey, you're doing pretty good, but you're the least in the kingdom. It's when you actually start to work with the actuality of how this energy system works, understanding the actuality of how your mind works and how to remove what never belonged, that you step up to the plate of what he called those who were higher in that so-called kingdom. Again, that word kingdom being the community of love. So where are you in the community of love? When stress happens, when the stress is up and the chips are down, does your mind turn to its God, hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, and blame? Then you would be called least in the kingdom. Do you automatically turn to love? Well, most of us not yet. However, with practice, you can get better and better, where your mind jumps in with some form of satanic resistance. What's satanic resistance? Stuck in the mind of man, believing the stories told to you out of the past by carbon-based memory. It's not a religious state. It's not a dude with a red suit, a tail, and a pitchfork. So for me, that was like, oh, that was a nice opening, a major piece of the puzzle, a new insight to recognize that, yes, there are high-level conversations in the game of the mind of man, but they're still not the truth. And we need to get to the truth if we're going to really, truly function as human beings. And the path laid out for doing that in the ancient Aramaic language is so monumentally powerful, so phenomenal. And the beauty is that it works. That's all. It works. So that's in a nutshell, that's what we're looking to do with these tools, to come into the understanding of what it takes to function out of the actual energy system rather than the realities generated out of carbon-based memory by the mind. Carbon-based memory being, the fact that our what we would call physiology. If you walked into a chemist's office and said, hey, I want you to assess what my body's made of. What are the elements? The base element of your body is the carbon atom. Now, if you look at a carbon atom, you'll see that in each carbon atom, unless they've been manipulated, the basic standard carbon atom has 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons. 666, that might be a familiar number. What was that called? The mark of the beast, or the mark of the Antichrist. What is the scriptures talk about the mind of Christ in you. What is that? It's not the mind of Yeshua. It's the mind that you have connected directly to love. This isn't theology. This isn't religion. It's that you're designed to live. Your highest life will come out of living in a mind that's connected to love. And so when that mind is active in you, the mind of man in you heals. Everything that you bring up out of carbon-based memory. And when you think of the mind of love being the mind of Christ, what's the opposite of the mind of Christ? Well, obviously it would be the Antichrist. The Antichrist has a number. What is it? 666. Carbon-based memory. If you look at people in a situation, a dozen people standing around and watching an event, and let's say the event is one that everybody agrees is terrible and painful and horrible and awful, you'll notice that each one has a different terrible, painful, horrible, and awful. One, perhaps from their carbon-based memory, has fear come up, terror. Another has rage. Another has the need to run. In each case, carbon-based memory is feeding them a lie based in hostility or fear. And the idea is to collapse the mind's constructs called perception so that the mind of love in you, the mind, what was called the mind of Christ in you, is present when that which is less than love surfaces. And when it is, those things that start to surface dissolve. And you're freed from carbon-based memory. You're freed from the 666. And, over the years, we've developed a whole series of tools for how to literally, really, truly achieve that in your life. There was a gentleman in the workshop yesterday that shared that his early life was one where his father was in and out of prison, alcoholic, very abusive, and a gangster. And he shared with us that his father trained him to be a gangster. And he eventually followed his father's path and became an alcoholic and ended up with a lot of difficulties in his life. And then stepped in about 20 years ago and started to do this work. He shared with us, and some of you might remember the day that he called in, and this is about 10 years ago now. This gentleman had spent 2 years at Heartland, and when he completed his service at Heartland, he was on the support team for 2 years. He was driving back to his home, and it was a long drive, so he stopped and spent the night. And here's a guy who, so much pain and so much trauma and so much turmoil that alcohol was his refuge. And he called the radio show that morning when we were doing the show and he was getting ready to get back on the road. And he called in great delight and excitement and shared that for the first time in his life, literally, and it was about 50 years at that point, for the first time in 50 years, he woke up that morning and his physiology was filled with the presence of love. And he woke up without fear, without anxiety, without trepidation, without pain. And, you know, when you see that kind of possibility, you recognize that each of us is capable. Literally, I offer that we are designed to experience our lives with each cell in the structure being connected and expressing active present love. That's what we're designed for. Our physiology is designed to function on that. And most people function out of some sort of anxiety, fear, depression, pain, trauma, because that's the generational pattern of their family system and of their culture. You know, you look at this whole culture, and it's so, I mean, just look at turn on the TV and just listen any day of the week to even the people who are billionaires, or at least supposedly billionaires and living the good life, are in such rage and crime and pain, literally screaming and raging at everybody, rotten, dirty, disgusting names for everybody in their life that won't agree with them. How does that happen? It happens when one has a physiological device filled with pain and trauma. And of course, there are so many people in our culture that carry that sort of stuff in their physiology. They're in resonance and jump up and support it, like, yay, yeah, let's attack. That's what the world's made for. I have to attack my enemies. Well, that's one approach, I guess, but, you know, that's an approach that leads to war. If you listen to this guy Yeshua 2,000 years ago, if you actually believe what he said, he says the solution to the game is to shift your physiology over to where it functions on love. When you think of the Creator, when you think of neighbor, and by so doing, you maintain your human life. We're here to awaken the human life in every person that we touch. Awake. And of course, you know, we've got some ragers. I mean, people that, you know, it's been verified that they, in one case, actually participated in torture at Guantanamo. One person who's very up there on the chain right now that's out there expressing this rage. And there's a whole campaign going on against people who are awakened. Those who step into a space where they recognize that perhaps there's some unfairness that has gone on and is going on in our society, and it's time for correction. And in this particular case, this particular man says, you come to my state, and that's where being awake comes to die. We're going to kill it. Book burning, the whole thing. I mean, it's crazy. And when we recognize that it comes from pain, it's time to acquire a set of tools with which to heal our pain and really, truly step up to the plate as human beings. Human beings have caring and compassion for each other, and attack is the last thing on their minds. If attack comes up in them, then they recognize that this is another opportunity to learn forgiveness. This is another opportunity to face something in carbon-based memory, the Antichrist mind. And again, this is not about religion. This is just literally where we live. This is how it works. It isn't something for Sunday morning. It isn't something for church. And so to step into that space, functioning out of conscious, active, present love, and, you know, as Michael Singer has been sharing with us in the book that Jeanie's been reading for the last few weeks, conversation that goes on in our head that's based in pain is a fake conversation, and we need to stop living out of it if that's what we've been doing, and we need to begin correcting that conversation within us, correcting the who's in there with you. So in a nutshell, that's what we're here to do. And Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anybody in the chat room with a thought for us?
We do have a couple of hands up. So the first one is
awesome. Let's say hello.
808. You're on the air. Who do we have?
Hello,
808.
Oh, hi, Jamuna.
Yes, that's me.
Welcome,
Hi.
young lady.
Hi.
How do you
Thank you
be?
for calling me young lady. What did you say?
I say, how do you be? You know, young lady, young man, that's my
well-
standard greeting because I believe we're all designed to be eternal and we need to stop buying into this fraud and this lie about aging. I mean, people will say to me, you know, Aria is 4. People say, well, how old is she? And I'll say, she isn't. And they'll look at me like, what do you mean she isn't? Well, she's been circling the earth for 4 years, but no, she's not old. Why would we feed that into our minds? So you'll get that greeting from me pretty much every time.
I appreciate it. I am eternal. Thank you.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay. I have a little bit of sore throat, but that's okay. Yeah, it's not. Anyway, yeah, you know, one of the things like the people that make lots of money, like, you know, that seems to make a lot of those paper strips and coins.
Right.
And why does it seem like some of the meanest or ones that are crying out for love the most get most of the paper strips and coins in the dream?
Well, I'm not sure that's really true. I mean, there's one, and I don't remember his name right now, one millionaire who did a YouTube video, I'm sure I could find it, where he's saying, you know, I'm a millionaire, I worked hard for my money, and I'm not paying enough in taxes. You need to tax me more. Now, other millionaires have said, well, go ahead, give them more of your money, but his point isn't, like, he's never going to fill the hole of poverty with the money he makes, but he's saying, in general principle, we need to step into a space of more fairness. And I think there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of those paper strips that do want fairness and are willing to pay their fair share. But then again, there's this old thing called greed. It's survival. You know, usually they have a dynamic in their lives where their power person literally threatened their survival, and their power person modeled that the solution, you know, the thing they were interested in was money. And so greed tends to take hold, and until healing happens, that runs the show.
Yeah.
But there's certainly a lot of it going on.
For sure. Thank you.
And I join you in us holding the space for healing all of that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that everybody in the country, everybody on the globe has enough paper strips to take care of the needs of life and to live in a decent, reasonable, comfortable manner. You know, when we recognize that lack of paper strips is one of the root causes of violence, then, and clean that one up, then we're going to get to play a different game. So that's what we're doing this work for, to create a different game.
That's right. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that sore throat, lots of water. Look at the healing principles. You know, make sure. I don't know if you're familiar with different categories of food, but one of the categories of food is congesters, starches, potatoes, sugars, those sorts of things. White pasta, those sorts of things will tend to exacerbate things like a sore throat or a healing crisis, whereas there's a whole category of foods called eliminators, things like fresh fruit, apples, you know, pears, those sorts of things. Bananas aren't a very good eliminator. They're kind of a congester, but eating more eliminators and making sure there's lots of water in the system, not at the same time as eating food, but lots of water to flush that stuff out. The healing process moves faster.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't eat white pasta or sugar, really. I try to stay away.
Awesome. Smart. I'll send you, Jamuna, I'll send you some files on on healing crisis. We've done several shows around that topic, and it'll maybe give you a different level of view of what happens when we become vital enough to start to process out some of that old stuff. And it's not Dr. Feelgood. We tend to become physically, mentally, emotionally locked into symptoms, and that, of course, willingness is the cosmic grease that helps the symptoms to move through and truly move to that next level of vitality. So I'll text you a link to some of those shows where we talked about that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ryce. Thank you.
You are welcome and deserving.
That's right.
Anything else on your mind?
No, the only thing that I was kind of thinking in the back of my head is that after that one session, that's when the sore throat happens. So I know that stuff is moving out, and like what you said, the healing crisis.
Right.
I know. Yeah. And
perfect.
So, it's exactly. I'm just really grateful.
Well, one of the things that makes for most people, the healing process very unpopular is it isn't Dr. Feelgood. We have to face what's in there, and the eliminative organs have to process it out, and it just, it's not necessarily pleasant. But once one gets the hang of it and stands in willingness, it moves a whole lot faster, and it gets a whole lot easier. Cool.
Thank you for holding this.
Well, thank you for your call.
Thank you.
All right. Have a blessed one. Bye-bye. All right, Miss Jeanie, you said we had a couple of hands up.
Yes, and the next one is Miss Susan, area code 610. You're on the air.
Hi. Hi, Jeanie.
Hey there. Welcome.
Hi.
How are you?
Oh, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you, you started off talking about some breathing you did.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you to tell us again. I didn't understand what you were saying, or I forgot it already or something.
Okay. Well, this weekend was a monthly MindShifters and StillPoint Breathing Club. And on Saturday and Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we do a session. Saturday is the breathing session, and then Sunday is a process session. So we did the Saturday session, and it was pretty powerful. This gentleman I was just talking about shared a lot of what he'd been through. He had just joined it on a monthly basis. And I was actually out in the garden early yesterday morning with some things I needed to do, worked for a few hours, and then came in to do the MindShifters and StillPoint Breathing process session. And when I came in the house, I noticed I have a marker in my body that tells me when there's something up for me that I'm not paying attention to, and that is there's a particular muscle, you've heard me talk about this before, in the back of my neck that tightens up. Yeah. So yesterday morning I came in from the garden, and bingo, I noticed that muscle's tight. So I did a StillPoint session, just breathing by myself before the workshop. And I went into some reverie type processing. I was aware that it had to do for me personally with some anger and resentment, but it wasn't fully cognitive. It wasn't that I had a memory come up of something that happened yesterday or when I was 2 or, something like that. It wasn't a cognitive type of thing, but I just went into this processing space, and when I completed, the muscle in my neck had relaxed. I had really had to concentrate my breathing into that part of my structure to get some energy to move there, to allow it to flow. And that's where, as I say, I went into some process stuff, but it wasn't cognitive. There were a couple of cognitive things that came up, but I don't remember them. They were like just, high speed, fast forward kind of still point stuff. But stuff just moved, and then when I went to do the session, it just felt like I was at a new level, and that's where that insight came of the least in the kingdom and the highest in the kingdom. He was talking about people who had, the question came up about Ho'oponopono in the class, and I've looked at it before, I've had conversation about it before, but I didn't understand at this level that was a very high conversation in the mind of men. Again, speaking forgiveness, letting people off the hook, rather than speaking rage and murder toward them, it's a pretty nice movement forward, but it still isn't the truth. And for me, that was just like a big insight to go, even though that stuff is beneficial, it's not based in truth. And what we want to do is get to the next level, and that is where it's actually based in truth. And the energy from the actuality is allowed awareness and entry and turning it over to that energy to run the system, rather than a conversation about, I love you, please forgive you, I'm sorry, which are all really, tragic conversations in the context of truth, but high-level conversations in the context of people who live in rage and fear. Did that get to what you were looking for in terms of detail or understanding?
Yes, thanks. I am looking for a couple of things. One is I get so much out of... Did somebody say something? Sorry, I thought I heard somebody say something. Okay. I get a lot out of the fact that both you and Dr. Tim, if anybody puts you on a pedestal, don't put me up there, I'm doing the work too, then you give examples, like you were talking about having some anger and then feeling a tightness in your neck. And sometimes those little personal stories are like a little trap door opens. They help me learn to have the stories. I love the stories. So I won't ask you about what the anger was about. I mean, you may or may not have known what that was, but and I find this to be true for myself, if I just realize I'm feeling this, even just to say I'm feeling this is part of what's going on right now, has a healing effect. Even if you don't do the whole...
just being able to embrace it. Yeah, and it wasn't cognitive. I couldn't say I was angry at, Harry or Mary or Hortense. There was no cognitive connection with it. It was just there, and I'm really thankful for this muscle in my neck that always warns me when I'm not paying attention to something. It's like, Michael, pay attention, or else you're going to hurt.
Yeah. I also wanted to say, when you say that if you want to really mess with a society, you change the meaning of their words. Meanings of words do morph over time, and not necessarily because some leader does it, but because, the most obvious one, since it's Gay Pride Month, or it was, is the word gay. The word gay has got a different meaning now. We don't use it in the sense of, I feel like kicking up my heels and dance, have a different meaning. And I wonder if the people who are suggesting that you find another word, they realize you're fighting a pretty tough battle, because even though Jesus may have meant it the way you teach, and it's great if we could all get that, and I'm not even suggesting that you change anything, but just that it occurs to me that you really are fighting a hard row. You're rowing. you're holding a hard row. Yeah,
tough row to hoe. Yep.
Yeah.
I've had that brought to my attention many times over the last 40 years, and each time, I've taken time and looked at it. And it's like, no, I'm going to stick to reestablishing the original definition of the word and having people understand that, because once people get a grasp of it and they start applying it and look back at that place where they have so much honor for, the ancient scriptures in many cases, it opens just something that otherwise isn't going to open if I just called it, something else.
Right.
It's got a history, and I want to link the truth of it up to its actual history rather than the bastardization of it that's happened.
Right. And I wouldn't be able to make a decent suggestion of a different word anyway. I'm just saying I'm acknowledging that you're fighting a profound battle here. It's hard.
Yes, I got it. I've been on that battlefield for a long time.
Right. Well, I have a couple of Jeanie reports and a request. I haven't spent enough time on the whyagain.org to be able to find that particular 3-hour Why Again talk that you mentioned. I offer Jacob as a business deal. And the opportunity to offer that to him hasn't come up, and I'm waiting for the right moment, and it's going to be soon. But we had a very happy thing happen the other day, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But if you have a link that's readily available and I can just use it, that would be great, because I haven't found it. I keep finding all this juicy stuff, but I went on your website and I just didn't find it. So.
Right.
Are you talking about the 3-hour?
The 3-hour why. Yeah.
3 hour. Okay, I'll send it to you, and I'll also put it in the notes for today.
Thank you so much, Jeanie.
How cool is that?
I want to listen to it too. Yeah, that is very cool. Jeanie with her capabilities.
She's always on it so powerfully. I am so blessed, dear heart. I am so blessed.
I know. You are. You didn't really know what you were getting when you went on that app to find a mate.
That's right. That's right.
God is so good.
But I bless them all the time.
Them.
The people who run the site.
Oh, yeah.
Where Jeanie and I met.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
eharmony.com. Yes, it was.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's been a major blessing for both of us.
Oh, yeah. It's wonderful. So in a similar way, but not using an app, Jacob met a girl at school that really took a shine to him. And he hardly paid her any attention, because when you're 21 years old and you're handsome yourself and talented and you're in the theater, the visual component of your life is a big part of how you present yourself.
Right.
And this girl physically was not in that realm. She was no Barbie doll. She's overweight and not massively so, and she just didn't come onto his radar. But she persisted, and they became friends. And at one point, they were spending a lot of time together. And he said to her, I'm really not up for a romantic relationship, but I'd like to be friends. And she said, great, that would be wonderful. She's like that. She's just allowing so much. Well, they've been together a long time. He finally sent me a picture of her. The picture was, thank you, Jeanie, I just got a text from you. The picture was complicated. She was facing the camera, taking a selfie for us to introduce herself to us and giving us the peace sign, but her face was complicated. It's as if she was saying, I know I'm no catch. I'm not beautiful. And it was kind of heartbreaking. And I greeted her back, and I said, Jake, tell me all the things you really like about her. And he said, well, it seems a miracle to me that she really gets me. I go into my rants, and she listens, and she doesn't cross them or correct me or anything. She'll say, oh, I really get that. I feel the same way, too. Or whatever she says, there's no pressure on him to be any different than he is, which is a lesson I've been trying to learn in my whole life. What, Michael?
A few sentences back, you said something that I just wanted to check out, and that was that something outside of you is heartbreaking.
Oh, get off it, Michael. Of course you're right. Okay. So.
Well, you want me to get on it then, right?
I know. Well,
So worksheet on heartbreak.
I felt pain in my heart on her behalf.
Yeah.
And maybe, and I'm not saying anything, you're right. It really, in fact, I feel even emotional just talking about it. I want to say to her, it's okay.
Great.
You are so beautiful.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't go out
for
of
it.
my way to say those things. She'll probably feel they're kind of nuts. But anyway, he said, Orb, I need my drum set. I need some clothes. I need to look through the junk I left at your house. She and I are going to drive to you if you'll have us. It's a 5.5-hour drive each way. And I said, we'd love to see you. So they arrived. She drove the whole way. She's 5'10" and big and wonderful girl. Just wonderful. Calm, appreciative, good listener, looks at him with great love in her eyes. She's not forcing anything anywhere. We had supper together. She thanked us. She helped us move stuff into the car, and they didn't stay overnight. They wanted to get back because he left his cat. But I thought, it's like your net thing or your dating app. These are God's touches. And God is good. How did God find this girl for Jacob? And, as Jacob and I were saying goodbye, I whispered to him, she's a real mensch, Jake. And he said, what's a mensch? And I said, it's a German word meaning a super wonderful person. I don't know the exact translation. It probably isn't translatable.
Right.
But I'm hoping we can reinforce that because he has found more than his two brothers who have dated girls after girls after girls. He's found somebody really special. She's a graphic artist.
That's awesome.
She's talented. Yeah. And so I just wanted to say, so of course that was not the occasion to present a business deal with Jacob about listening to this
Of course.
3-hour thing. But I do want to say to him, Jake, and I hope this isn't too dishonest because it's sort of partly a fake. I'm going to listen to this because there are some parts of it that I need to clarify, and I'd love to have somebody have a dialogue with me on it. And I'd like to hire you to be sort of my bouncer offer of ideas. Would you listen to this? And I'll pay you, and we can have a conversation, or you can write an essay. But I didn't even want to strap him to the ground with an essay, although that's a brilliant idea.
Right,
I'd rather just,
right.
can we have a talk? So I wanted your blessing on this little plan.
Well, I'd invite you to do a worksheet around dishonesty there. And
Okay.
as you watch it, I'm going to offer that. Honestly, you're going to say, there's some pieces that you will get and need to get that you could use support in understanding. I don't think that's a lie at all. We all could. I watch it again, and I get new pieces of understanding. So I wouldn't think that it was dishonest. And when I hear you talking about Jacob and this young lady, my input is that, we live in a culture where a big disadvantage for males, we talk about a sexist society, but there's a real atrocity that is done to us as males, and we're told that we're supposed to have relationships with bodies.
Yep.
And that if the body isn't acceptable via a certain standard, then that body needs to be rejected and thrown away. And we treat each other, if we come from that mindset, as property. We treat each other as objects. And we live in a culture that when you're finished with an object, you're supposed to throw it away. So relationships become throwaway. And it sounds like Jacob is moving into relationship from a state of being into a relationship with a being rather than a body. And what a gift is that?
Oh, my God. It's amazing. And he was funny, and he started ranting about politics. I mean, you think you're bad, Michael, and I know you are very bad sometimes. But
me? No, I don't think I'm bad. I think I'm pretty good.
Well, I'm not going to argue with that, but he gets into a rant. She'll look at me with this meaningful look, and I said, he's doing a rant, right? And she said, yep. And then she'll look at him and say, Jacob, you're in your rant. get off your soapbox, enough. And he'll say, oh, sorry. And he'll stop. So she knows how to relate to him in the most gentle way. And I don't know, I just think this is God's work. And
well, I think it's awesome that, I think it's awesome that they're in relationship with each other as beings. And that's like, God, if he can get that at 20,
yeah, I know. What a lot of trouble he's being saved. Yeah.
Oh, man, you're not kidding. And keep reinforcing that with him so that he recognizes the brilliance of what he's doing, even if it's something that's kind of seemingly happening by accident.
Yeah, I know. It's great. So anyway, that's my teeny report, and I'm glad to get the link. I will get the ball rolling with him. I may wait till he calls and asks for money, and I say, sure, I'll send you, but here's the deal. This is a business setup. And
cool.
We'll go. Yeah, it's a great idea. Really
well, it's
great
so
idea.
nice. It's so nice to hear that he showed up with this relationship budding and sweetness, and it sounds like it was like you've been working for 2 years to get to a positive, loving, caring interaction with him from his end, and it sounds like you got it. Nice work.
Thanks. Well, it's true. And I had another thought that just went out of my head along those lines. Maybe it'll come back. Doesn't matter. I feel
profound and powerful.
Yeah. We can go from here.
Holding the space for it.
Thank you.
Cool.
You gave me, or maybe it was Dr. Tim, because, man, last week, both of you, I had you working with me on something. Was it you who said, cancel all the times I've wanted people to live as the presence of love? Do you recognize that? It doesn't matter, but that pretty much is it.
I'm not sure.
Whether you did it or, yeah.
And of course, the extension of that would be canceling the need for you to demand of yourself that you live of the presence of love is going to be an important worksheet.
Toward others and toward myself.
Amen. Yes, of course.
Oh.
All of the above.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good. Well, Dr. Tim worked with me, and you've worked with me, and I've got several pages of notes, and the processing has been, it's like an octopus. Well, you use the word hydra. That's what it is. So yep. I can't really talk very intelligently, but thanks for all the input from both of you.
This is right on. I'm delighted that you've stood in willingness and that you're getting to experience the fruit of your work. And to watch the transformation of that young man in a period of just 2 years from the power person dynamic and the pain and trauma to where, and I'm not suggesting that he maybe is totally finished with all of that. There may be some other layers of that to come yet, but just to be able to step into this space where there's this caring, loving interaction with the woman, with all that he's had pointed at you and pointed at his mother. That's awesome. Nice work, Orb.
Thank you, Michael.
You are most welcome and most deserving. I mean, your willingness and movement toward healing is impeccable.
It's bumpy. Okay.
I understand. Okay, bumpy impeccable. But you keep moving forward. You come up layer after layer, and you just keep moving forward. And when you realize that what we're cleaning up is a multi-generational database that is so profoundly instant and powerful. I was watching a video last week on YouTube. I kind of keep an ear on the technology world. And they're now at the point where there are laws about, and they're considering banning this new quantum computer that they've been developing. And a quantum computer does its computing on electrons. It used to be that it was done on, magnetics and transistors and all of that. Now they're getting down to a power level where the example that was used was a scientist who was explaining it, and the computer scientist. And the example that he used was that the highest level Cray computers in the world, the really powerful ones, they feed a particular logarithm into it, and it would take 10,000 years running 24/7, 365, 10,000 years for this giant Cray computer to solve that logarithm.
Wow.
And the new quantum computers will do that job in 200 seconds.
God, and with AI and all the other stuff that's coming out?
Well, that was
blowing
the question.
The mind.
What's going to happen when what's going to happen when these two get married? That was the question this computer scientist was speaking about. But my offering is that this quantum computer called carbon-based memory is more profound and more powerful than that. That literally in our genes is the memory of every thought, of every feeling, of every reality, of every trauma, and every wonderful thing, not just in our lives, or as the scriptures talk about, the sins of the fathers are passed to 3 and 4, not just 4 generations of lives,
right?
But literally the memory stored on, maybe even further down than atoms, maybe on electrons, because it's quantum computing. They're talking about storing information on atoms, computing with atoms. Maybe maybe God had it all figured out to have it work on electrons, because literally, when you do the multiplication, when you start thinking these generational patterns, you go back, we've talked about this many times, you go back just 30 generations, and there are 1.6 billion lives. Think about what you've been through individually, what I've been through, what Tim's been through, what each of us have been through in our lives, what Jeannie's been through. And then there are 1.6 billion in just 30 generations.
Yeah.
And it's exponential from there. That, if you go to 31 generations, that doubles. If you go to 32 generations, that result doubles, and it doubles. Go back 50, 100 generations, and that's what's in us. That's what carbon-based memory is responding from.
Right.
And that's what needs to be cleaned up. So it's pretty amazing, and it's pretty monumental that, as Richard says in the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It's like, it's amazing we're even alive.
And the only way we could possibly come out the other side of that on the positive end is by remembering that we are not separate. We can't separately achieve all that, but in a collective way, maybe we can. That's a wild hope.
Yes. Well, as Einstein presents it to us, and he had this understanding of the quanta, he says, if you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion. And we could add to that, you're living in the optical delusion of carbon-based memory, the Antichrist mind in you that is formulating pictures out of unresolved traumas when you're in pain, out of unresolved dramas and traumas from 100 billion, 200 billion, 500 billion lives in your bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the optical illusion we're stuck in. That this man, Yeshua, 2,000 years ago, knew exactly how to collapse the lies, how to collapse that construct of the mind is nothing short of miraculous. And I look what it took for me working full time with it, with the history, with the training in theology, with the training in psychology, with the training in electronics. When I look at it, it took me 35 years to comprehend, to be able to explain what happens when you use the forgiveness process. It's like it boggles my mind.
Yeah. You didn't mention nutrition. You did
well,
that
yeah,
too.
That's another whole factor. Yes, it's another big piece of the puzzle. It's holism. It's the whole picture. That's one of my doctorates is in holistic philosophy. How does it all fit together? And until we bring this piece in of the quantum computer called carbon-based memory, 666, all kinds of things are figured out by the non-being mind that seem to be pretty good. And so much of it's just garbage.
Yeah.
So it's amazing we're still around, and it's amazing, when you look at the history of violence in our world, we're really, with all the crazy stuff going on, we're really a pretty peaceful society and culture when you look at the past, individually and collectively. Yeah, there's still all kinds of horrific abuse and crazy stuff going on, and family
Good
stuff.
To be reminded of that.
Trafficking, human trafficking, sexual abuse, that sort of thing. And if we look at history, we're moving along at a pretty good pace into the healing process, and I have great confidence that we're on the cusp of critical mass that's going to bring the shift through the whole game. Because people like you say, I'm going to face it and I'm going to deal with it. And when I change it, when you or I or anyone that's doing their work, change it in their quantum mechanic device called a body-mind unit, they open the energy window for everybody else with the same issues to do it more easily and more easily and more easily. So it's pretty amazing.
The encouragement leaks in spite of not having finished the work by a long shot. There are perks that come in around the edges, little twinkles. Like I was pursuing happiness as a thing. It's not good to do that. But if the work is done, suddenly the joy leaks in there and you think, whoa, where did this come from? And it may not stay, but it's like a little signal. You're on the right track. Keep going.
Yep. Teilhard de Chardin.
Joy
is the infallible sign of the awareness of the presence of God.
Yeah.
Happiness comes from the dopamine hit we get from achieving a goal. To reach the joy space, you have to do the opposite. You have to start canceling goals.
I was going to argue with you. You just said it. Good.
Exact opposite direction. Yeah. It's amazing. Most amazing. So let's join in continuously asking to be taught from the actuality, what will lift us up to the next level, into that actuality and into that presence of joy that we're all designed for. So joining you in it.
Thanks.
And appreciating you in your process. All right, young lady. Well, the show's just about to cut us off, so I'm going to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world.